Hogwarts Legacy might be one of the most aptly named games in years. After 50 plus hours, it felt as if the entire game was a making of the history for the movies and the books later on, where you feel like at times things that you're doing in the game might have slightly created the worlds that you get to experience through the Harry Potter movies. How I knew that Legacy was working is when, within the first couple hours, I actually forgot about Harry Potter themselves. It was astonishing how quickly the game transported me to Hogwarts, my own story, the familiarity and all but the solidly built on story of the characters prior, going away and leaving me with this new feeling against new enemies and new places to explore. A mysterious sign in ancient magic and the tried and true Harry Potter world, but years prior, Avalanche and WB have tried to move the open world forward. Let's see if they did. Thanks to WB for the review code. As you know, that means I buy a copy and give it away to one of the patrons. For every GTA, for every Red Dead, there's a Saints Row or a Gotham Knights, open world games that feel lean in their presentation, lacking in their depth, and replicating their IP as shallowly as the ray trace reflections that they crow about in their previews. Hogwarts Legacy says, let's throw all of that away and deep dive into the world. My brand is me, my sponsor's me. Subscribe if you like the video. This game rips right out of the gate. One part I was worried about is if this would get lost in its own narrative and need to exposition dump. Hogwarts is thick with lore, and it does spend some time reminding people that they're playing in an established game world. However, it doesn't treat the gamer like they have no clue how to read and couldn't figure out what game they just purchased was. It handles the intro deftly, injecting mystery almost instantly and then setting you out as a new fifth year into an opening that is one of the best looking open world locations that has been offered. That starting has a sense of unashamed excitement and exploration. It's profound throughout. Gone here are the old days where you enter a game with a well-known IP and see a few callouts in barren rooms, each reminding you forcibly that the developer and the gamer have an agreement as to what needs to be shown. Even when you're through that initial place, taking classes at first isn't just showing up at the room. It's discussion with others, with the teachers, with looking around, finding a couple secrets, then perhaps a quest or two to get items for the current class, then returning and taking part in the class proper. This makes the entire process way more fleshed out, and a lot of the expectations start to fall to the wayside and being replaced by surprise. It also introduces you to new characters from each class, the teachers, and organically moves you through Hogwarts, even if it's only briefly here to grab some items, making it feel like your only job outside of the class isn't just to run around and map the location, because you know a thing or two about the castle and its locations, and that solidifies those classes together with Hogwarts itself instead of transporting you from place to place to place. Alongside the normal story as a fifth year new to Hogwarts and meeting new characters, after you choose which house to be in Hogwarts, the game proper starts. It also has you consistently exploring outside the castle in larger story plots and quests that keep you consistently moving through the different locations, across and back to Hogwarts, and then back into the land. Everything feels like one large place instead of two separate locations. And exploring here is done on foot at first, and then later on brooms and other different items. Finding hamlets with new quests, some quickly done like a collection or two, and others longer that may promise of further parts for quests at a later time. Quests for merchants, for a variety of questionable and questioning characters at any one time, and consistently exploring between the two locations. And that brings us to combat. So at first you're outfitted with just a basic attack spell, a defensive spell, the ability to hold the button to parry as well as roll out of the way of attacks. Mixing and matching all of these moves is the way to take out the first enemies, each one teaching you a bit more about the combat mechanics. You can also duel and join dueling rings to learn more about playing not only against single opponents, but groups of opponents. And that is important. Learning that you can't always just hold, block, and parry, as enemies can hit you during that switch between the two. Learning to identify what skill is needed to cut through an enemy's shield and then levitate them and push them off a cliff. Quite quickly, the game introduces you to combos, mixing of main spells and attack spells to keep enemies in the air being juggled. But of course, that won't always work. The first time you try to levitate a larger creature and they shrug it off means you have to change all the tactics, because the entire combat stream isn't going to work the way you expect. I mean, a combo has to start with one, and if you can't hit one, you got to rethink things. Spells are applied on the digital pad, 4 per group, with traits that you can unlock later, letting you get a total of 16 mappable spells across the digital pad and the face buttons. And this is highly important because setting them up right can be the difference between life and death. You want the face buttons beside one another that facilitate a combo, but then if you face another group of characters where that combo isn't always successful, you may want to move them around. It's almost like wizards in a D&D game, choosing what spells to learn at night in the old days. Here it's the momentary thing, but it actually engages you and fosters a huge amount of experimentation. And if you don't want to, you don't necessarily have to. You can still do a lot of those combos anyway, but the ability to jump in there there and change them so easily makes it feel like something that really would occur with a character who's going out and facing enemies that are shrugging off some of his attacks. And that's needed here because the game is not easy. Combat can get you in deep trouble if you are not taking care. Fighting turned out to be much better than any of the videos showed. First, on the controllers, the vibrations are telling. The information you get and informing you of what's occurring and offering excellent feedback is highly important. The combos, the way the combat works, it's a mixture of guards and parries and dodge rolls with all the spells, and then pulling down ancient magic and throwing it back into the enemy, evaporating them, require you to really have a good sense of timing and location in this game. Grabbing something to throw it into an enemy can also be the difference between life and death. But at any one time, the enemies can do pretty much the same to you, and they do. Turn the difficulty up and enemies move more. They attack with speed, and they consistently switch it up. And even the students in the dueling section on the hardest difficulty shows that a major worry a lot of us had with Hogwarts is pretty much, at least at this time, put to bed. It's not perfect, but it is far more original than I expected it to be. Also, these can be augmented by traits. Now, traits are augments to your spellcasting you unlock later on in the game, augmenting basic abilities, stealth moves, dark arts themselves, and more. You can pick and choose, like, do you want your fire spell to also send out a ring of fire? Do you really want to pull all your enemies towards you instead of just one of the enemies? Or instead, maybe you spend some points that you can sprint while invisible, augmenting stealth so that you can rain down fire on enemies and build up your special meter to cast incredible, powerful magics that only you have. The idea is you won't be able to unlock them all, and I wasn't able to. But I did find that little bit of variation, as well as traits that are on the items that you get for clothing, ended up being the juice for the combat. In comparison, for instance, to games like Forspoken with a number of spells, and no matter how you play it, it always felt a little bit cumbersome switching between those, Hogwarts feels much less so. How many games become that drudgery, though, of working through the ever-growing feeling of stratification of ideas that felt fresh 2 hours in, that feel almost desiccated and pulled out thin 12 hours in due to repetition? Legacy is always showing you something new or suggesting a new way to go about something, offering a new enemy type that's going to require you to think out of the box or a new ability for you to have. And just far out of the box is going to depend on the level you are and the difficulty that you've chosen to take the game on. It always feels good, even if the main character's ability to jump over something seems a little bit suspect, like he himself doesn't know just how good his knees are. Dodging under a heavy attack, lighting a wolf on fire, then twisting around, blocking and stupefying a goblin feels incredible. And while the combat is usually the end experience, the quests get you to move around the game world. Now, many open world locations have their own gameplay conceits and titles. They become these concrete boots that sort of sink them into tedium. The world here doesn't advertise the intent of the gameplay elements for the most part as you're traveling around. Instead, they reward you for exploring. You don't always find a location and surmise instantly what will be happening here. Hogwarts isn't all about surprises. It's just that it gives them to you occasionally, and it seems just as happy as you are to see them. It's incredibly rewarding as an experience and much more akin to the building block world that we may see in a Red Dead than the hodgepodge of, let's say, Watch Dogs. It's not just that Legacy respects the years of fiction, it's that it consistently expands it, regardless of the enemies, the lore, or the spells you're getting. It's like opening one of the original books and somehow someone cast Expando Chaptero and there are more pages there. Whipping through the woods on even a cheap secondhand Ron Weasley type broom is breathtaking. It's a surreal spin on speed and exploration that really does its damnedest to make you feel exactly like a young kid would feel exploring a game world like this. But there are some issues. First, customization of your character has its ups and downs. For example, no matter how hard you try, everyone you can create in Legacy looks a bit like everyone else you can create. Like the main character's parents spent their nights at a free love Wicca magic and music festival, and everyone's a bit too related to everybody else. I'm not lying, I tried, but there's always a fundamental look to your characters that seems very close to anyone else. So multiple playthroughs, there's a bit of uncanny valley there. Luckily, that stops at the clothing options. The game lets you go wild, consistently finding items everywhere in the world. If you don't like a scarf, but you like its traits and bonuses, you can have both. It's a nice mix. And if you want to get more items for your inventory, you can take on some challenges around the game world. You can also sell items to vendors, and you won't lose their graphical design, even if you do end up selling the actual item. So that customization of self is very high here, but that is actually something that you pick up when you're playing Hogwarts. The sense of self is almost too high. Let me explain. The game handles groups and adventuring in a side saddle way, with you occasionally picking people to move along with on some of the quests, and much less like a BioWare game, and more like Bully with just the occasional character that goes with you. It's not that you're solitary all the time, it's just that it never quite gets off the ground when it comes to that group dynamic. What's interesting about Hogwarts Legacies is it's like the mullet of open world games. While nothing within the first hours of the games could really be called business-like, you're at Hogwarts, you're a student, the life there is a little bit dangerous at various turns. You're still taking traditional steps of a new student. You're learning, taking classes, talking to teachers, even if some of that is involving you being drugged to dangerous places. But then you go out into the back 40 and it is party time. The large open world parts of Legacy are incredible, and they offer a great contrast to the inner locations within Hogwarts, from finding hidden cemeteries with callouts to various characters and groups and monsters and magics of the Harry Potter histories, to riskier steps, diving into the Forbidden Forest, trying to burn down 100 trees to take out that one last spider that's leaping and digging into the ground, ready to trapdoor you from behind. Then you're back at Hogwarts, raising animals, creating your own potions, taking more advanced lessons, learning the weaknesses of enemies originally thought impossible to defeat, and then trooping out there to do so. How does all this look? Well, Hogwarts looks pretty phenomenal. It's made leaps and bounds ever since the gameplay trailer we saw recently, with pop-in something that occurs here and there, but certainly not as much as I expected. It isn't perfect, but regardless of the graphical setting you choose, more on that later, Hogwarts shows that the best looking games aren't just that they pipe in some ray tracing so a rock looks a bit more rockish, but understands theme and atmosphere. And that means flying through the grasping trees of a swamp with fog rolling in, it should feel powerful, mysterious, dangerous, and creepy. And this game's delivery of the atmosphere is exactly that. It starts from the very moment, as I talked about before. The game begins throwing your character into this incredible location that harkens back to Harry's trips to find out just how many Horcrux one bad guy could have. It's a cliffside repository, locking mysteries behind its doors and consistently making you question just how much you probably want in. Because if a prize kills you, it's not a prize, it's a surprise, and it's a bad one. Luckily, there aren't really any bad surprises in this game. Let's be honest, as gamers, I think a lot of us feel lied to just a bit, just a smidge, a little bit of Vaselinus Obscura cast on a vision of some title that gets a downgrade in its graphics when it's released. I can't say that any of that really happened here. Despite some issues here and there, it pretty much always delivers or over-delivers. The animations on the characters, the clothing that billows during the more powerful spellcasts, to even the way they animate, the incredible detail in most of the main characters, the shimmering of skulls on my cape is scariness +7 that I bought. Luckily, the consoles have a lot of choices for your settings. You have fidelity with ray tracing, balanced performance, and high frame rate performance. Of course, those fidelities are going to try to hit that 30 FPS with 4K. Balanced is going to be a mixture. And then when you get into the performance and high rate performance, you're looking at 60 FPS and 120 mode. Be aware that some of the modes also support variable refresh rate if your TV does. Resolution is adjusted on each of these, with 4K being that aim for fidelity. I think the resolution drop that I was seeing in performance was a bit noticeable. There's also a problem here. While you can change all your settings for motion blur and film grain and vignette and all that, if you want to change between ray tracing mode and not, you do have to reset the entire game. Now, this isn't necessarily a problem with their game, but it does make testing a bit difficult, especially if you're a person who jumps in and out of those to sort of see how they're going to play. I would suggest if you do that, you jump in and you really play a good deal of the game, whether you go from fidelity to performance, and especially with that ray tracing mode, to really get an idea of what's being delivered to you, because depending on where you are, the frame rate hit on the ray tracing can be quite noticeable. If you do have VRR, you are going to be a step above the game for everybody else. But here's one big problem the game does have, and it hit me a fair number of times. It has a frustratingly tight FOV. The enemies are tantalizingly mobile, moving side to side, leaping and dodging and surrounding you. It's not hard to feel like your fifth year is just one gigantic wand-carrying butt in an ass-kicking contest. In the castle, this can also become disconcertingly close. Feels like you're performing a number of different felonies or offenses with that camera. Inside buildings, it's frequently popping in and out as your character is very tall for that FOV. Casting spells against enemies on a cliff face above you can also feel really wonky. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see if the PC version has the ability to change that FOV, but in the consoles, it is pretty tight, so be aware of it. Regardless of what frame rate the game runs at, it's the atmosphere that just always works well. Hogwarts is filled with secrets and puzzles and shoutouts to histories, mysteries, and consistent Hogwarts fiction. It's always giving you something, and you can get lost in the castle. There's a possibility, well, it's probably a certainty, that you're going to be in there and get lost at time, even if you have the location tracking system on. There's secret rooms you can find, instructors' rooms with magical chalkboards slowly marking out the day's lessons with arcane symbols and mathematics that seem almost tantalizing familiar to cause you to sit there and stare at and try to figure out what's being done. And while I don't think Hogwarts is up to the comparison of a Red Dead 2 or GTA 5 in terms of pure world and wildlife and scope, the fact that I'm mentioning it beside them when so many titles in the past wouldn't and shouldn't be mentioned in that comparison, I think proves enough about Hogwarts' quality. Speaking of quality, let's talk about the presentation for voices and sound and music. The voices are excellent. First, yes, the character has the ability to turn the tone up and down on that character during the customization. Please leave it. Trust me, whatever artificial system they are trying to use to change the character's voice makes you sound like a robot talking from the bottom of a well. Even the main character honestly normally has an odd timbre and a bit of a processed sound that can pop up. That's just a warning. That being said, I overall dig it. I dig the explanations. The inflection that the character usually gives is hitting right. There's a couple where that inflection is a bit off, but overall I think the writing is good. And you get full drawn out conversations with a lot of characters in the game, a huge number of them. Even the side narratives, the bit moments where you hear two characters fighting on the side is almost always interesting or adds something to the game world. However, it's the professors that take the cake here. Each one is nuanced, and while they may not all resonate with the instant concrete memory of, say, a Snape or otherwise, many are really good. Professor Ronan, he's quick to joke, always looking like his brain is inhabiting a body ready to break into dance at any moment. This mannerism that he has is of someone still mystified by magic and finding curiosity in the same activities that the students do, and that nets him a win right away. And most all of them are that good. The game's lip syncing is very good for the most part. There are a couple that are inflicted a bit with thick face. It's the animations that rock, though. I won't spoil it here, but sometimes a bad guy is a bad guy because he just looks like it. His face just couldn't make it through real life because no one would ever think he was happy. You have some of that here where the venom, the hatred, the disdain are so instantly noticeable that the vocals are simply there to add nuance to how much someone hates you. And that really worked well. A little less so was the sound. Now, 3D tracking, it's well done, but it takes a bit of fiddling. The game offers a number of lesser settings like cinema and speakers and headphones, but some of that adjusting may need to be done within your system, the PlayStation, the Xbox, or the PC settings. I found that it was relatively easy to dial in, but you may want to go in there and adjust those settings to see if everything works. The battles in Hogwarts are almost always consistently group affairs with enemies pouncing and pawing and popping into existence and getting punched out of their shoes around you. So having good 3D audio is going to be important. I tested it with the soundbar, home theater, as well as headphones. They all worked fine. I was able to discern enemies behind me as well as around me. I will say that the alert bell that goes off when you use your magic user vision to find important items in the game world is a bit of a mixed affair. Here, understanding the timing is very important. The longer it takes to ring and alert you of something, the farther away that item will be based on distance. That makes sense. However, especially inside of Hogwarts, it can be difficult to identify those items if they're above you or below you, and you can find yourself looking around a bit more than you probably should. That being said, walking along the beach across a treacherous cliff is breathtaking. You can hear individual waves smashing into the rocks below and above you, and of course the spells sound awesome. And another thing that's awesome is the music. This was surprising for me because Hogwarts Legacy has very unique music, though at the first blush it does not appear to. It can appear very close to the music we have in the Harry Potter games and movies. The chimes, the bells, string sections deeply resonating during big plot moments. But the longer I listened to this, more I realized something else was going on. The soundtrack fulfills the task of feeling like Harry Potter right away, but it's actually somewhat deconstructing a bit of the themes from the original movies. Like the music and the arrangements are a bit more primal, a bit more basic to reflect the earlier times in the ancient arcane storyline that's the genesis for the game itself. But later on, you'll notice that chord changes dramatically or that notes play choppier, building up something pretty unique. For me, it's a testament to a soundtrack if I'm going to listen to it outside of the game, and I will for Hogwarts Legacy. But was it fun? How did it all come together? After 50 hours, it felt as if the entire game was a making of history, where you feel at times that what you did in the game world somehow slightly creates the movies and the books. The game's always giving you something interesting, from fiction to items to performing challenges, side quests, main quests, causing the player to actually work for some of the figuring out of the puzzles and not just giving you the answers or letting you track it down right there. It rewards exploration at almost every single turn. But the best part of the game is that you get to walk with the exaggerated swagger of a Hogwarts student. Jokes aside, that's what it feels like you are. From classes to ripping across the game world on creatures to figuring out the story proper, it does a very good job of making you feel like you're there. I would have loved to have seen the game have me group up with other characters far more often. I would love to have had more choices and responses to characters and quests, most follow into a good or a bad kind of feeling, because that's sort of what you need to do to finish the quest, at least when it comes to main stories. I also think that the game would have really benefited from a deeper customization system for the characters' faces and looks. And I get it, you can't have kids with beards and mustaches looking like they're taking a polyjuice prolactin inhibitor and testosterone shots, but that's why I think more adjustments to the faces and the looks would have helped to really make me have the ability to create a character that looked unique and not somewhat exactly like they want them to look underneath. Also, why the equipment system is fully fleshed out and each piece of equipment does change the overall statistic of the character, it never really felt as fleshed out as I would have liked. I would have liked to have seen a few more statistics there because there really aren't that many. Now, for a lot of people who like light RPGs, this is going to fit perfectly with what they are actually hoping for from a Hogwarts game, and I think that's fine. It was just a little bit of complexity I could have dealt with. But regardless of that lack of surprise, the big surprise was exploration, combat being fun, and the game having a bit more difficulty than I was expecting, especially if you set it up high. So as you guys know, I rate games on a buy, wait for sale, rent, or never touch it again rating system. This is well worth getting right away. Fatigue in open world games is an illness everyone gets, like a cough in a smoggy city, and you try to fight it because you like the food there. Hogwarts is more than 50 plus hours, never once making me feel fatigued. It's a testament to how satisfying the activities can be, how surprising the story can be, how mysterious the exploration can feel, consistently surprising you bit by bit, like a fairy tale that you yourself have been writing and telling at the same time around a fire somewhere. It has its issues, but even when it does, they feel pretty fresh. The quests are enjoyable, many of the smaller ones requiring you to do a bit of your own thinking and footwork, which made them feel so much better than I expected, as was most of Hogwarts Legacy. So anyway, that's it for me. If you guys like this review, I would love for you to thumbs it up. Follow the most evil, difficult boss that we're all fighting right now is YouTube demonetization. So I would love for you to follow the channel, hit subscribe, the notify all button. If you want to check out the Patreon, you can. I try to give you guys reviews where I save you some cash or maybe warn you away from a bad game. If I've done so, you can check out the Patreon, join us. We do all kinds of streaming as well as giveaways, different stuff in the Patrons. I would love to have you join up. Peace out. Gang, gang.
Revelio. Accio. I need those pages, so I suppose I'd better meet you. Thank you.
Not to worry.